So, episode or part three, and part three of Lost Generation, or is it? No, it's Lost Generations. And I just finished up part two where I was talking about how all the wedge issues are actually kind of proxies for the race aspect, and race kind of is really at the forefront of every wedge issue. And that's why people have to dance around the wedge issues so carefully. And that you're allowed to be on the left side of the wedge issues, and you're allowed to be on the right side of the wedge issues, but you're not allowed to point out that the wedge issue is a result of race, and that the underlying problem that causes the wedge issue in the first place is a result of racial, problems. That's not allowed. You're allowed to be a fervently pro-life, fervently pro-choice, but you can't say we need abortion because of the black population or the underclass. You're allowed to be pro-gun, you're allowed to be anti-gun, but you can't say we need guns because of blacks. See what I'm saying? Like you're allowed to be anywhere on the spectrum, but you're not allowed to be where you are on the spectrum because of black people. So that's really what you're realizing is that that now we're starting to get to the real kind of controversial viewpoints. You can still be a compassionate person, a really nice person, and just think race is a really big part of politics, life, how societies form, because society is essentially an emergent phenomenon, right? So we have to be realistic in terms of how people contribute to that. So, the other issue is affirmative action, and I think that it really goes against all this idea of meritocracy that we're raised on in America. It really goes against the idea of fairness, that all that kind of stuff, equality that's built into America, Americanism, and Westernism, and the Christianity, and also the Viking or Norse traditions are also very big on equality and everything like that. So it's a cucked policy. I mean, it absolutely is. It's a weak policy. It's irrational, but it's also bad for Black America to have affirmative action because it means that their women are advantaged over their men because the women are double quotas and the men are just single quotas. And to be honest, corporations are more keen on hiring black women than black men, because the black women may occupy more of the clerical work, or just may not be seen as a threat to the partners or to the higher ups at the company. They may be seen as more docile, and also black women are much better at accent switching. You'll see this with Oprah, for instance. Oprah Winfrey has multiple accents. Sometimes when she's talking to black women, she talks black. And it's not a joke. She's not acting. She's not, she just shifts. And when she's talking to the main audience, she talks white. But you'll notice that black men don't do that. No black men do that. Like with Charles Barkley, if he's announcing, he doesn't switch his accent to be, or Chris Rock. Black entertainers, black men, black professionals, they don't accent switch. No, there's black guys out there who talk like white people all the time, but they don't switch back and forth as much. Black women are very apt to switch. You'll see them in the audience, in the office, and they'll be on a conference call sounding all white, but then the black girl comes into the office and she's like, "Hey, boo," it's a strategy that black women have adopted. So, it means that black women are advantaged over the black men. That means that they have no reason to ever marry them. That means that it's just encouraging more of a bastard generation. I mean, so structurally, it sounds like you're putting black people in positions of power to have affirmative action. What you're doing is just taking that opportunity away from somebody who deserves it and, giving it to a token black woman and taking away her incentive to marry a black guy who makes less than her. And you are incentivizing that if she does have kids, it's going to be a bastard child. But what you're also creating is resentment, racial resentment. A normal, even-minded guy like myself has absolutely no reason to resent, the presence of other races or, multiculturalism, as long as it's not creating bad impacts on the environment or, the social environment. Completely open to accepting more people. But when you have affirmative action where every job I apply to, I have to self-identify and be at a disadvantage in the country that my forefathers, settled, conquered, defended, built, for me to be at that kind of disadvantage is a legitimate reason for me to have resentment against all black people, because they all benefit from affirmative action, and in particular all black people who support affirmative action and all white people who support affirmative action. I have legitimate resentment against them. But I obviously have the most resentment against the black people who support affirmative action, and the utmost resentment for the black people who support and have benefited from affirmative action, to the point where I believe I'm entitled to reparations because of what's the natural rights that have been taken away from me in this, quote unquote land of the free. What affirmative action does to me is it means that I'm no longer an American. America is no longer my country. My country has told me that my primary group, my primary affiliation, is with my race as a white American. And so, because of affirmative action, I feel more loyalty to whites all around the world than I do to black Americans. It doesn't mean I dislike black Americans, but because I have to identify as a white American every time I fill out a job application, that means my primary affiliation is white. And I just happen to be American by chance. And it makes me realize that politically, the black Americans in this country don't care if I'm given a fair shake. They just want to have a power grab, and so they don't actually represent my interests. That means that I can't identify with Americans, or the Americans that want to vote for affirmative action, because they don't represent my interests. So America doesn't represent my interests. I have to identify with white interests. I am part of the white nation. And so I want to advocate for the white nation within America. There really are multiple nations. And that wouldn't be the case if there wasn't affirmative action, and I'd rather it not be that way. So, affirmative action is a legitimate reason to be racist. In the sense of racial resentment, in an abstract sense, and maybe that's what they want. Maybe that's what the people who started that policy wanted. Maybe they want racial resentment. We'll have to see. That remains to be seen. So the idea is that race realism is at the heart of all of this, red pilling, all of this pessimism, this criticism of the Pollyanna idea of society. But it doesn't mean that there's any value judgment to it. You recognize race realism as the best explanation for social trends. It doesn't mean you want it to be the best explanation, or you didn't wish it otherwise. The facts are in, and adults have to decide what model to use of society. So the problem is that the race realism debate right now is it's dominated by white nationalists, and I've been following these guys for a while. They are kind of picking up on a lot of the problems in society. They are picking up on a lot of the injustices against whites. They're picking up on the hypocrisy of the left and things like that. So for these reasons, they're good critics, and some of them are well read, and so for these reasons, they're worth checking out. They're relevant, but their solutions are actually inadvisable, and white nationalism is a really a failed kind of solution set to to the problems we face in America. Europe may be a different story with some of the smaller Scandinavian countries, but here in America, white nationalism is not really going to make sense for anybody. And first of all, it's not in the interest of whites to implement it. The United States is really so much based on the capacity, money, business, having workers, and so many whites are invested in that system, in the stock market. Whites are not aligned at all. Rich whites benefit from the current system. Middle-class whites are largely satisfied with their lives. No reason to disrupt the system. Even working class and poor whites still have satisfaction levels that prevent them from being politically active in racial politics. This idea is a non-starter, the idea of white nationalism, because white people don't want it. It's not feasible to implement because the banking system has so many minorities in debt, and the DNC depends on their votes. So they're not going to give those up. Chuck Schumer, he's not going to give up his voting base. So come on, I mean, this is it's really kind of like child's play. White nationalism, it's not an advisable path to prosperity or stability or security. They do raise issues about the parasitic multiculturalism, which is true. But they don't realize that whites should just focus on forming voluntary associations to reduce their participation in government, and that's the government that disadvantages them. Whites should move away from public housing and intergenerational poverty and over-dependency on welfare and pockets of crime that drains societies. So they should move away from that and move to white areas if that's what they feel is in their best interest. And they should get involved in politics and dominate at every level they can. That's really the way to solve the problem. The problem is that the issue is that there's in the past economic imbalances always have caused whites to be discontent. In the past, discontent whites came to America, or they came to the New World. They explored. There was the age of exploration and the age of immigration. Now, it's almost like whites are too crowded in their own country. We need to start exploring again. We need to go out and explore the new frontier. So I'm more supportive of settling that frontier, or even bringing back some kind of neo form of colonialism within special economic zones that aren't exploitative, but a neo form of imperialism or colonialism, or settling out the frontier, making it into an adventure. And if there are some minorities who are able to contribute to those settlements, that's great, but I think it's going to primarily draw white people who want to be self-sufficient. And so you don't even have to make a white nationalist country. You just say, we want to make a settlement where people are self-sufficient. And guess what? Guess who's going to show up? It's going to be all white people. So, people are just looking for, I think, a new solution beyond being single in a big city with a office job and being married in a big city with an office job. I mean, they want an alternative to those kind of two modes of life. Maybe they want, some kind of intentional community or a group to kind of plug into. I think, a tribe is what humanity naturally wants. So, just wanted to get things kicked off. Was reading off some of my notes from HackPad. Wanted to keep things light, keep things lighthearted for the first episode. Starting to lose my voice a little bit. Don't want to just read this, and I'm running out of time. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.